The sun had barely cracked over the plains when the boy screamed, "Don't leave her here. She's my sister." His voice cracked through the cold like a gunshot, shrill and desperate. His boots skidded in the dust as he chased after the wagon, stumbling, falling, getting up again, blood mixing with dust on his scraped knees. The wheels didn't stop. The man driving didn't look back, but someone else did at the edge of the ranch yard, half-shadowed by the leaning barn and the broken fence line. A tall figure stood still, worn duster flapping in the morning wind, a battered hat pulled low over tired eyes. John Briggs had seen a lot of things in his 45 years. Men burned alive, women traded for whiskey, families torn apart by greed and hunger. But he'd never seen a boy like that, hands bloodied from gripping wood, face gaunt from two. Many nights without food, tears cutting clean lines through dust on his cheeks. The girl lay on the ground like a broken doll. She was barely 6, maybe younger. Wrapped in a torn shawl, ribs poking sharp under thin skin, legs tucked under her like she'd tried to stay small and safe in a world that no longer had use for kindness. Her eyes didn't open. The boy reached her, collapsed beside her, and curled his body around hers like a shield. That was the moment. That breathless pause before the wind changed, before the sun fully rose, before the rancher moved. Let's go back to where it all started. 3 weeks earlier. The ranch had been quiet. Too quiet for a place that once rang with horses and hammers. John Briggs had stopped hiring help. There wasn't much land left to run. A string of bad years, rustlers, and railroad men with fat hands and sharp papers had taken most of what he built. All he had left was a stretch of dry creek, 3 horses too old to sell, and a barn that leaned like it might sigh and fall any day. Now that he didn't mind the quiet, though. After what happened in Missouri, it was better this way. No one asked questions. No one needed favors. Just the wind and the sky and that endless, aching space between him and the past. Then came the storm. It rolled in from the south one night. Dust first, then thunder. John barely had time to pull the horses into the barn before the sky split open. Rain came down like judgment, hard and bitter, and with it came the wagon. He saw the lanterns first. 2 of them, swaying like ghost lights on a preacher's cart. Then the wheels groaning in the mud. For men, soaked to the bone, faces hidden under wide hats. One of them had a long scar down his neck. Another kept coughing, even after the rain stopped. They weren't from around here. John had met men like them before, the kind that traveled too far, carried too little, and smiled too much when they spoke about money. They didn't ask to stay. They just told him they were passing through. Said they had some cargo that needed warmth for the night. He let them bed down in the empty bunkhouse. He didn't ask what was in the back of the wagon. He should have. That night, he heard crying, faint, childlike, smothered quickly. He sat up in bed, listening. The wind had stopped, but something else moved through the ranch, a feeling heavy and wrong. He dressed, stepped out with his shotgun, and walked into the dark, but by morning, they were gone. Wagon tracks in the mud led north. He found scraps of cloth by the barn, a torn ribbon, a girl's shoe. Now the sun touched the hills. The boy's fingers trembled where they held his sister's. She wasn't moving. He looked up at John, with the kind of look a grown man would flinch from, not begging, not demanding, just pleading, like the part of him that still believed in help was barely holding on. She didn't eat for 3 days, the boy whispered. He said she was too weak to be worth keeping. John crouched slowly, watching the girl's chest. It moved, barely. Her lips were cracked, blue at the edges. He felt her skin. Cold. The smart thing would have been to walk away. Say nothing. Go back inside. Close the door, and let the road take what it would. That's what most men would do out here. That's what he would have done, before Missouri. But Missouri was still in his hands every time he looked at a child's eyes. He lifted the girl gently. She weighed less than a sack of oats. The boy stood, fists clenched, ready to fight if he had to. John didn't say a word, just turned and carried the girl toward the house. The boy followed, bare feet silent in the dirt. Inside, John laid her on the couch near the stove and fed the fire. The boy hovered, watching every move, like any wrong step would be the last straw holding his world together. What's her name? John asked quietly. Ellie, the boy said, then added, I'm Tomas. John nodded, took water from the kettle, tore strips of linen, and began to clean her face. She stirred once, a soft sound. Not quite a word. You two alone? Tomas hesitated. Armand died last winter. We was with him since March. Said he'd take us to California. His voice hardened. He lied. The fire popped. Outside, a hawk cried over the prairie. John looked at Tomas. No more than 10. Maybe 11. But already shaped by too much loss, too much hunger. The kind of kid who'd remember every kindness like a map carved in his bones. You hungry? Tomas nodded, eyes wary. Good. There's stew in the pot. Eat slow. She'll need broth first. He turned to tend the girl again, but something stopped him. Tomas was staring at him, eyes wide. You're not going to send us away? John didn't answer right away. He felt the weight of that question like a stone in his chest. A part of him still wanted to keep his distance, not get involved. But the girl's hand clutched his coat sleeve, and that was all it took that he exhaled, deep and heavy. No, I ain't sending you nowhere. Behind him, the wind changed, and far off in the distance, somewhere past the hills, a rider watched from the trees. A man with a scar on his neck and too much silence in his soul. Something had been left behind, and now it would have to be claimed. John hadn't meant to care. He'd told himself this was temporary, just food, warmth, a few days to let the girl gain strength and the boy catch his breath. But as the sun stretched across the August plains and the dust settled on his porch steps, something in the rhythm of the ranch began to shift. Ellie started eating by the third day. Thin broth at first, then bits of bread soaked soft in milk. Her eyes stayed closed most of the time, but her fingers curled when Tomas held her hand. She whimpered in her sleep. Sometimes she said things, soft, frightened things. Names John didn't know. Places she might never see again. Tomas slept on a blanket by her side like a loyal dog. He barely spoke, but when he did, it was always about her. She don't like the dark, he'd say. Or, she's scared of the wagon wheels. The creaking kept her up. John watched him. Watched the way the boy walked wide circles around trust, but always kept Ellie at the center of everything. It was the kind of loyalty a man didn't earn overnight. It came from blood and pain and a promise. Whispered when no one else was listening, that be why the end of the week. John had added water to the stew twice to stretch it out. He'd given Tomas his old boots. Cut down a dress shirt for Ellie, sewing the sleeves tighter with rough stitches. He didn't speak much. Didn't need to. The ranch spoke for him, but the town did not. It started with a rider. He came in just before noon. A neighbor, Wilcaro, who ran cattle 6 miles east. Tall, always talking, always smiling like he was selling you something. John had known him since before the war. They'd fought on different sides, but wound up burying the same friends. Will rode in slow. Didn't dismount. Just rested his hands on the horn of his saddle and stared at the porch where Ellie was sitting wrapped in a quilt, sunlight warming her cheeks. That who I think it is? Will asked. John didn't answer. Will clicked his tongue, shifted in his saddle. They passed. Through my place week for last. That man, the one driving the wagon, he tried trading the boy for a jug of rye. Tomas froze. His fork clattered on the porch floor. John stepped forward, hands calm, but firm. I didn't ask for company, Will. Will held up a palm. I ain't accusing, but folks talking. Saw tracks lead in back to your place. Said maybe you took in something you shouldn't be. John's jaw tightened. She's a child. Will shrugged. That don't matter to some. Word gets out a man's harboring runaways, or worse, stolen children. It brings trouble. Real trouble. Sheriff's already got ears up. One wrong whisper, and you'll have riders coming. From all sides. Tomas looked up at John, face pale. John stared back at Will. Then maybe it's time folks minded their own damn business. Will's eyes hardened. You and me both know it don't work that way anymore. You feed strays, you answer to the town. He turned his horse, gave a last glance at Ellie, and rode off without another word. That night, the wind changed again. John sat on the porch, oil lamp flickering beside him, shotgun leaning against the wall. He'd been here before, the quiet before a storm. The way animals went still. The way fire popped louder than usual. The way silence pressed down like snow on a pine branch, waiting to break. Inside, Ellie coughed in her sleep. Tomas sat beside her, eyes open, clutching a wooden carving he'd whittled that afternoon. A little horse, rough but careful, just like him. John didn't speak until Tomas did. Are they coming for us? The boy asked. John looked at him a long while, then answered with more truth than comfort. Maybe. Tomas swallowed. You could send us away. Like they want. John took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, I could. A long pause. But I won't. Tomas blinked. Why not? John leaned forward, voice low. Because the last time I walked away from someone who needed me, it cost more than I could carry. I don't plan on making the same mistake twice. Tomas looked at him, and for the first time, his shoulders dropped. Just a little. Like he finally believed the words were real. The next day, the sheriff came, rode up with 2 deputies and that same too calm look he always wore when trouble walked beside him. Sheriff Judd Lowry, part preacher, part politician, all nerve. He was the kind of man who smiled at funerals and signed arrest warrants like he was brushing lint from his coat. You know why I'm here, he said. John didn't offer a seat. I got 2 kids who needed shelter. Not what I heard. Heard one of them might be property. That true. John stepped forward, blocking the porch. She's a child, not a mule. Judd's face didn't change. And the man who left. Her. He's got papers. Claims he was their legal guardian. He sold them. John growled. Left the girl to die. Maybe. Maybe not. But that ain't for you to decide. Tomas appeared behind the door, Ellie peeking beside him. John held Judd's gaze. She stays. Judd sighed. You know what happens when folks start choosing which laws to follow? John nodded. Yeah. Sometimes it's the only way things ever change. Judd turned to go. You've got 3 days. After that, I come back with a writ. John watched them ride off. No dust this time. Just the long, dry silence of a man who knew war had been declared. Quiet, soft-footed, and just beginning. That night, Ellie said her first full sentence. I had a doll once, she whispered. Her voice raspy. Her name was Miss June. She had yellow hair. John paused mid-step. Tomas looked up, smiling through tears. It was a small thing, but it was enough to remind them all that she was still in there. A little girl, broken but not gone, and someone wanted to take that away again. But this time, they'd have to come through John Briggs first. The sun barely rose the next morning. It just kind of showed up, tired and red, like it already knew what kind of day it was going to be. The wind moved different. Slower. Like it was listening. John saddled his best horse before the coffee even boiled. He moved like a man who'd been through a siege before, checking gates, filling canteens, loading shells into his old Winchester one click at a time. He didn't tell Tomas anything. He didn't have to. The boy had that same quiet in him. That old, wordless fear that gets into your bones when you're too young to understand it and too old to pretend it doesn't matter. He followed John around the ranch all morning, watching, thinking, carving another horse from a chunk of pine, as if that little act of creation might hold the world together. It was just past noon when they spotted the first rider. Way out, past the cottonwoods, a shape moved against the hill, too far to make out a face. But the way the horse stood, head high, tail still, that wasn't a man out for a ride. That's a scout, John muttered, glassing the horizon. They're watching. Who? Tomas asked. John looked at the boy and answered like a man tired of pretending. Men like the one who left you. Folks who think you and your sister belong to someone. Or worse, that she's a message. And I just interrupted delivery. He set the spyglass down and turned toward the barn. We don't have long. Inside the barn, he opened the trapdoor. In the far stall, a hideaway he hadn't touched since the war. Blankets, salted meat, a little pistol, oiled and waiting. He showed it to Tomas, then pushed it back in with a slow, steady hand. We ain't there yet. But if I tell you to take her and run, you don't ask why. You just go. You understand me. Tomas stared at him, small jaw clenched tight. I ain't leaving her. John gave the boy a hard look. Then you better learn how to keep her alive. The next few hours passed like molasses through a sieve. Slow. Too slow. Until it wasn't up by sundown. There were 6 riders and no badges. No flags. Just men with rifles and dust on their coats, faces half covered and eyes fixed on the ranch like it was already theirs. They didn't shout. Didn't ride close. They just sat out there, maybe 30 yards from the front gate, their horses shifting under them like they knew what kind of work was about to start. John stood on the porch with his shotgun resting across his arms. Tomas and Ellie were inside. The door barred, windows darkened. A man with a red neckerchief stepped forward. Tall, cruel, skinny, The kind of thin that doesn't mean hunger, it means calculation. His voice carried like a sermon. You got 2 children don't belong to you. John didn't move. They do now. The man gave a little laugh. That's cute. But the girl, she was promised. Man paid for her, far as we heard. Not your place to interfere. John's hands tensed slightly on the shotgun. What you're talking about ain't law. Ain't right, neither. The man's voice dropped. Ain't about right. Ain't about law. It's about delivery. There's folks down south waiting. You hold that girl, you hold up money. And men get killed. Over money. John didn't answer. The silence stretched like a loaded spring. You got till dawn, the man said finally. After that, we don't knock. He turned and rode off. The others followed. No guns drawn. Not yet. Just patience. Like they'd done this before. Inside the house, Tomas stood near the window. He hadn't flinched when the man spoke. But now, alone with John, he asked the only question that mattered. Can we beat him? John looked at him. And for a second, the truth was almost too heavy to carry. No, he said finally. Not if they want it bad enough. Tomas nodded. Then he reached down and took Ellie's hand. She was asleep again, curled against the blanket like a cat, small and silent and so fragile. What if I went out there? The boy whispered. Told them to take me. Maybe they'd let her stay. John stepped closer. That's not how these men work. You give them something. Once, they come back for more. Always. Silence. Then John added, quieter. I tried it once. Years ago. Gave up a family I was helping. Thought it'd save the rest. It didn't. They took him anyway. And I carried their names longer than I ever carried a rifle. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, an owl called. I don't got much left, John said. But I got enough to stand for you. Tomas's voice trembled. Even if you die? John nodded. Especially then. They slept in shifts that night. Tomas by Ellie's side, John by the door. The stars were sharp and hard above the plains. Watching. Waiting. And then, just before dawn, something changed. Footsteps. Not horses. Bare feet, crunching softly in the gravel near the barn. John was up in an instant, gun raised, boots quiet. But what he saw stopped him cold. A girl. Maybe 15. Apache. Wrapped in a deerskin shawl, face streaked with dust, eyes full of fear and something fiercer beneath it. She held up her hands. I know the man who claims the child, she said, her voice shaking in English. He stole. Me too. For years ago. I got away. John stared at her, stunned. He sells children to men who wear gold buttons. Soldiers. They pay good. The girl is not his. She is from the river tribes. He stole her from their fire. John lowered the gun slowly. Why come now? The girl's eyes darkened. Because I heard a man stood up to him. And I thought maybe, if that man still breathes, he might need help. A sound behind them. Tomas, stepping out from the shadows, wide-eyed. John turned. Heart pounding. Well, he said, his voice gravel and wind. Maybe he does. But even as he spoke, they all heard it. The unmistakable sound of rifles being cocked in the dark. The siege had begun. The air turned thick, like something old and bitter had risen from the soil. At first, it was just the clicking, iron. On wood, men moving behind fences, shapes flanking through sagebrush in the pre-dawn hush. But then silence. Total. No birds. No wind. Just the waiting. John stood on the porch, shotgun braced in the crook of his arm, eyes sweeping the tree line. The Apache girl, who said her name was Niall, sat cross-legged near the barn, carving marks into the dirt with a piece of bone. Tomas stood at the window, holding Ellie's hand, his face pale but focused. The little girl, too weak to understand, barely stirred. Niall looked up. They wait for sunrise. That's how they do it. Like coyotes. Wait till the prey is outlined in light. John exhaled slow. Figures. He checked the rifle again. Shells in the belt. Extra powder in the crate. He didn't have enough. For a long fight, and he knew it. You ever shoot? He asked Niall. She nodded once. Better than most of them. John tossed her the old Colt he'd cleaned last night. That'll help. But if we don't talk him down, it'll get messy. Niall didn't blink. They won't talk. Still, John had to try it out. He stepped off the porch. Just a few paces. Just far enough to be seen without putting himself in the open. Then he spoke. Send your boss out. He can talk. To me or face the law. Nothing. Then hoofbeats. Steady, confident. The man with the red neckerchief rode forward like he was out for a morning stroll. A toothpick in his teeth. Rifle across his lap. Law's 3 days that way, he called. And even when it does ride out here, it listens to me. John squared his shoulders. You've got no claim. I got the right kind of ink on the right kind of paper, the man replied. And that means I get the girl. John's voice cut back, steel behind it. You come on my land again, I'll bury you in it. The man's smile twisted. Wheel. See. He pulled back his reins and disappeared into the scrub. John walked back to the porch, slower than he felt. His heart hammered in his ears. Not from fear. From fury. Inside the house, Tomas stood. He'll come, won't he? John nodded. Yeah, but we ain't alone. He turned to Niall. You said Ellie's from the river tribes. You know which. Niall looked at Ellie, her face softening for the first time. She wears a braid charm. Willow and quartz. That's Kiowa. John blinked. There's Kiowa camps east of here. Niall nodded. A day's ride. If she's kin, they'll protect her. John rubbed his jaw. Too far. We won't last a day in a siege. Tomas stepped forward. What if I ride? They both looked at him. John hesitated, then shook his head. No, you're too small. You wouldn't make it past their scouts. Niall stood, eyes already searching the horizon. I'll go. You sure? John asked. She looked at him, eyes burning. I lived 4 years in their cages. I know how to slip through their nets. John gave her his best horse, strong, fast, smarter than most men. He pressed a note into her hand, scribbled in pencil on the back of an old invoice. Girl named Ellie. Taken from Kiowa. Held by slavers. We are protecting her. Come if you can. John Briggs. Then Niall was off. No words, just a look. At Ellie, and then gone into the rising wind, her shawl snapping behind her like a flag of defiance. Now they waited by midday. The first shot came. It wasn't meant to hit anyone. Just a warning, fired into the dirt by the barn. A line drawn. John didn't return fire. He waited, measured. He knew that shooting first only gave them reason to end it fast. But the pressure built. By sundown, they'd surrounded the house. Not fully, just enough to make escape impossible. Smoke rose from a small campfire in their line. They weren't hiding. They were settling in. That night, John told Tomas to sleep in shifts again. But the boy didn't sleep. He sat by Ellie's side, singing something soft. A tune only the two of them knew. Something from before. John watched from the shadows. The sight of them, two children, clinging to each other like driftwood in a flood, stirred something in him that felt dangerous. Hope. The next morning, Tomas stepped onto the porch holding the little pine horse he'd carved. He stood there, quiet, and looked toward the enemy camp. Then, without warning, he threw it landed in the dirt halfway between the house and the treeling. John stepped out beside him. Why'd you do that? Tomas shrugged. So they see it. Why? The boy looked up. Because we still got something real. And they don't. John swallowed hard. Said nothing. Then, midday, the drums came, low and distant. Not war drums, signal drums. Niall had reached them. By dusk, the riders came. Not a war party, not yet, but a line of Kiowa men and women on horseback, braided hair and bone-beaded coats, faces painted in silence. They rode with the weight of mourning and the steel of justice. At their front rode an older woman, face lined by sun and loss. They didn't speak when they reached John's gate. But the man with the red neckerchief did. He rose from his camp, startled, angry. What the hell is this? The Kiowa woman answered. That girl is ours. You took her. Now she returns. He spat in the dirt. You got no claim. That girl was abandoned. I paid for her. You paid a thief, she replied. That makes you nothing. And with that, 20 rifles leveled. In one breath, John stood in the middle, heart racing. Not from fear, from something else. Maybe the ending. The man with the red neckerchief looked around. At John, at the rifles, at the woman who stared through him like a ghost. He did the math, and slowly, he stepped back. He and his men mounted. Their horses rode off without a word and vanished into the dust. No glory, no threats, just retreat. John let out a long breath. Tomas stepped beside him, stunned. They left. He whispered. John nodded. For now. The Kiowa woman dismounted, stepped forward, and knelt beside Ellie. She pressed her forehead to the girl's, then looked up at John. She remembers our lullabies, she said softly. John swallowed, nodded, and just like that, the girl had a home again. But something lingered. The silence, the space, the ache of what almost happened. John walked out into the dark, stood where the pine horse still lay in the dust. He picked it up, held it, then handed it back to Tomas. She's your sister, he said. Always will be. And the boy, for the first time since arriving, smiled like he believed it. The prairie was quiet now, the kind of quiet that only comes after the blood doesn't spill, the silence of a gun not fired, of war unsummoned. The Kiowa had stayed through the night, not as an army, but as a family. A small circle of horses tethered under the cottonwoods, children gathering firewood, elders speaking in low tones beneath the wide, orange sky. They didn't ask for thanks. They just were. John Briggs sat on the porch, his hat in his lap. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, not from age, but from the weight that had almost come down on them all. Inside, Ellie slept on a proper bed, not the couch. Niall sat beside her, humming something half buried in memory. And Tomas, he was outside, feeding the horses, talking softly to one of the Kiowa boys, trading words in broken rhythm. English for Kiowa, one piece at a time. John hadn't asked what would happen next. He already knew. They couldn't stay till he heard the soft rustle of a skirt and looked up. The Kiowa matriarch stood at the steps, her long hair braided with willow strands, the wind catching the edges of her woven shawl. Her eyes were soft, but steady. She remembers her name now, she said. Elsie. John nodded. That's Kiowa? It means my joy. They were quiet for a moment. Then she added, we will take her with us. But if you say the word, she will stay here. She clings to the boy as if he's her breath. John looked out across the field, where Tomas was laughing. Actually laughing, for the first time. The sound caught him off guard. It hit like a memory. A sound he hadn't heard since long before the war. She's stronger now, he said. She is, the woman agreed. But her soul is still small. It needs others like it, who understand the world she came from. She needs us. John didn't speak. He just stared at the horizon, where the clouds met the grass, where the past used to live. Then take her, he said, almost whispering. But not without the boy. The woman looked at him sharply. You would give him up too? John met her gaze. I didn't raise him, but I stood for him. And that means I don't break what's already healing. She considered that, then nodded. He can come, but he must choose. John stood and called the boy over. Tomas came, running, dust on his sleeves, a feather tucked behind one ear. His eyes were brighter now. Something alive had woken inside him. John crouched to his level. You heard? Tomas nodded. They want her back. Take her home. They want you too. The boy's face tightened. John waited. And then Tomas said, soft but sure, I go where she goes. John smiled, slow and sad. I figured. Tomas looked up at him. You could come too. John ruffled the boy's hair. My trail don't run with yours, son. Not anymore. But it's a good trail. And you'll have others to ride with now. They embraced, not long, not dramatic. Just a simple grip that meant everything. Later, when the sun began to fall, and the horses were ready, Elsie, was lifted into the saddle. Tomas climbed behind her, arms around her like a shield. Niall rode beside them, proud and still. The Kiowa rode out in single file. John stood at the edge of his fence, hand resting on the rail. Elsie turned once, waved. Tomas did too, but his hand stayed in the air just a little longer, like he wasn't sure if he was saying goodbye or thank you. Then they were gone, and the ranch was quiet again. For weeks after, the place felt hollow. The porch creaked in a lonely way. The bunkhouse stayed empty. The little wooden horse sat on the mantel, gathering dust. But then, one morning, a rider came. A boy, maybe 15, Kiowa braids. Broad smiled that he handed John a package. Said nothing, just nodded and rode off. Inside, wrapped in soft leather, was a note, written in careful, crooked English. I'm learning their stories now. They tell them with fire and dance and songs I never knew. Elsie sleeps through the night. She's not afraid anymore. She sings now. Sometimes it's that one song from back when, the one I used to hum to her. Niall says I have the hands of a carver. She's teaching me how to shape bows, how to read the sky. I miss the porch. I miss your stew. But I think I belong here. I hope you're not alone. You shouldn't be. You're better than you think. Tomas, John folded the letter carefully, set it beside the horse on the mantel. He poured himself a cup of coffee, stepped onto the porch, and sat in the same chair where Tomas had carved that horse with a dull knife and raw fingers. The sun rose slowly, spilling gold across the empty field. Somewhere out there, two children were safe. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything.